Did you guys know that for some reason, out of bounds on Route 2 in Pokemon Yellow, there's just this random cut tree? You can't see it unless you glitch out of bounds, and there's no point of it being here. Kinda similar to the infamous truck near the SS Anne. Pokemon, and the Generation 1 games in particular, have a lot of these weird oddities that don't make a lot of sense. I guess that's what happens when it takes 6 years to make a game that has gone through multiple heavy revisions. Did you also know that they made a mistake with some of the type effectiveness so that bug type was super effective against poison type? They tried their best to make the Pokemon types work in a rock, paper, scissors like system, with the most easily explained version of that being the fire, water, and grass type. But then we have the dragon type, which is only super effective against itself and also weak to ice. Both of those are still the case in modern Pokemon, but the only issue with this in Generation 1 is that there's only one dragon type attacking move in the entire game in Dragon Rage, which just does a flat 40 damage every time and can never be super effective or resisted, meaning Dragon being super effective against Dragon would just never happen in Gen 1. Dragon Rage doesn't technically always do 40 damage when you go for it though, since although it is a 100% accurate move, there is still a chance for it to miss. In fact, every single move in Generation 1 has a chance to miss, even if the move is supposed to be 100% accurate, and I'm not talking about from things like Sand Attack, which lower accuracy. Due to a programming oversight, a common topic for this video, any move has a 1 in 256 chance, or about a 0.4% chance, to just miss. The way misses are calculated are based on a random number between 0 and 255, with 0 being included to add up to 256 total outcomes. And if the randomly generated number happens to be 255, the move will miss because they accidentally set the code to say if the value is greater than or equal to 255, the move will miss for 100% accurate moves, rather than just saying greater than 255, which would never happen and is ideal for a move that's supposed to never miss, which would make sense for a move that is supposed to be 100% accurate because it can never be higher than 255. So if the random number generator for attacks picks 255, you're just out of luck. It's pretty common knowledge by now that speed plays a big factor of getting critical hits in Gen 1 too, with faster Pokemon just having a better chance to crit, which is part of the reason why Tauros, of all Pokemon, is so dominant in Gen 1. And unfortunately for Tauros, since Generation 1 hasn't really done much of anything. On a similar note though, if a Pokemon goes for a multi-hit move like Pin Missile, the game only checks for a critical hit on the first hit, and will then make every sequential hit after that also a critical hit, meaning you could technically hit 5 times and get a critical hit every single time, which would be really frustrating to be on the receiving end of. Now, you know how in modern Pokemon we have attack for physical based attacks, and then defense to defend against those physical type attacks, as well as special attack for those special moves, then special defense to then defend against those special attacks? Well, in Generation 1, we have attack and defense, of course. Then we have just special, which combines both special attack and special defense. This means if a Pokemon has a high special, like Alakazam, it can take advantage of Pokemon with low specials by hitting them very hard, or just by taking special hits very hard, which is part of the reason why Alakazam is arguably a top 5 Pokemon in Gen 1. And if it's not top 5, it's not too far outside the top 5. When I started writing this video, I didn't expect this to mainly just turn into me talking about battle mechanics in Gen 1, but we're in too deep to stop now, and there's so many weird oddities when it comes to just Gen 1 battling, so let's just roll with it. Let's talk about Exeggutor for a bit, a Pokemon that nobody really cares much for except for a brief period in Gen 7 when it got a really long neck, which was a flash in the pan. But Exeggutor was also very good in Pokemon Red and Blue, which according to a YouTube poll I did a little while ago, a good chunk of people watching my channel have never even played. Part of why Exeggutor was so good was because it could put things to sleep, and the turn a Pokemon took to wake up would waste your whole turn, meaning Exeggutor could just put your Pokemon back to sleep that turn. But Exeggutor, as well as just about every grass type, had another devious trick up their sleeves, or their leaves. A nice staple grass type move is Leech Seed, a move that takes some damage from the enemy and then heals you with that damage at the end of every turn. This can be combined with Toxic to do more damage each turn, but in Generation 1, Toxic and Leech Seed use the same formula to calculate damage. So if they were ran at the same time, Leech Seed's damage would double each turn, much like how Poison's would as a result of Toxic, allowing the combination of Poison and Leech Seed to do a lot of damage and completely decimate any unsuspecting opponents. As for Paralysis, it would cut your speed down by 75% instead of 50% like it does now, but if you were paralyzed and went for Agility, it would just set your speed back to normal and double it, meaning you could still get fully paralyzed, but at least you were much faster now to make up for it a little bit. Similarly, if you were burned, it would half your attack, much like it does now, but then Swords Dance would just return your attack to normal and then double it. The attack drop also stays even if you use an item to heal it like a burn heal, or went for rest, which would also get rid of the burn, which does make burn a bit better in Generation 1 than it is now, but compared to the other statuses in Gen 1, it was by far the weakest and not as devious as freeze, the most devastating status by far in Gen 1. That's because in Gen 1, if your Pokemon got frozen, good luck, because the only way to get rid of the freeze is by using a healing item or get hit by a fire type move, which in a link battle your opponent would never do, or if your opponent went for Haze, which they would also never do because Haze wasn't that common of a move for a Pokemon to have. This effectively means if your Pokemon got frozen, it might as well be knocked out as if the freeze was an OHKO move. On the topic of OHKO or one-hit KO moves, they did have an accuracy of only 30% like many of them do today, but one-hit KO moves fail in Gen 1 if the target Pokemon has a higher speed stat, making them practically useless on slower Pokemon. If you were playing through a regular game where you could use items in battle though, an X accuracy would guarantee that all OHKO moves would hit, which could be easily exploited with the fast Pokemon, and can make for some funny speedrun tactics. Now for the rapid fire round on broken moves in Gen 1. Recovery moves that heal up to 50% like Soft Boiled or Recover would just fail if the user's maximum HP and current HP left a remainder of 255 when divided by 256. This can most commonly happen on Chansey since it was a Pokemon with a very high HP stat that also had Soft Boiled. Focus Energy, a move that's supposed to increase your critical hit rate, just doesn't work. In fact, it does the opposite and lowers your critical hit rate, because instead of using multiplication in the coding to calculate critical hit rates off Focus Energy, they use division instead. Roar and Whirlwind are moves that force your opponent to switch into the last Pokemon of their party, or in wild battles, it would just end the battle. But in Gen 1 trainer battles or link battles, Roar and Whirlwind just didn't do anything. Honestly, not sure if that's a mistake or not, but it's weird to have a move that just does nothing in the majority of the battles you'll be using it in. If you go for Hyper Beam, you normally have to wait a turn to recharge after going for it, but in Generation 1, if you knock out a Pokemon with Hyper Beam, you don't have to recharge that turn, which is yet another reason why Tauros was so good and not that good anymore. It's also worth noting that this was before the physical and special split, so normal type moves were all physical. The move Struggle was also a normal type move in Generation 1, so if you ran out of PP against a ghost type Pokemon, you would literally struggle just to end the battle as quickly as possible since your struggles would never hit. And this is even more frustrating when you consider the fact that NPC trainers in Gen 1 had infinite PP on their moves, and they would never struggle even if you were struggling. That's enough for moves, let's talk a bit about AI, which seems to be a pretty hot topic right now. The AI in Gen 1 is pretty silly since they almost always go for a move that they think would be super effective. This makes sense when you first hear about it, but the AI sees non-damaging moves like Agility for their type in Psychic and don't realize that they don't do any damage. So against Lance's Dragonite, for example, you could just send out a Pokemon weak to Psychic like Zubat, and the AI will just pick Agility every time, as it's a Psychic type move and technically super effective against Poison types, thinking it's the best option. So yeah, in short, Generation 1's battle mechanics are plagued by glitches, programming mistakes, and oversights in general. We've come a long way from then to now when it comes to Pokemon battling and mechanics though, as Pokemon is basically an esports now with its own regional circuit happening every year, or it's at least trying to be an esport.